So we ended 2014 with the US Marshals auctioning off some more of their Bitcoin. Enter 2015 and we see the arrival of the banks and them trying to figure out a way to how to have blockchain without Bitcoin. This was the year that we had blockchain, not Bitcoin. And in fact, I'm going to skip ahead to this headline from Bloomberg Markets on October 25th, 2015. And it has on the cover Blythe Masters, the former head of the precious metals trading desk over at JP Morgan. And it's all about the blockchain, they claim.
So this is an attempt by the banks to nudge their way into this emerging market. And they can't recognize Bitcoin as such because it's a competitive threat. So they've decided that the underlying technology of blockchain is something that they want to be involved with, and that if they can push blockchain over Bitcoin, they can get into this business but without having the competitor of Bitcoin. And Blythe Masters is a well-known character on Wall Street who created and invented the credit default swap to help Exxon avoid all kinds of taxes and environmental penalties.
There is a very good quotation by Bill Gates writing on a book in '95 that the internet will not be important. What will be important is instead the highway of information. Internet will just be a small part of the highway of information, but the most important thing is not the internet, is what is the concept beyond the internet. Blockchain is the same. I think it comes from the typical Kubler-Ross elaboration of loss theory. Basically, at the beginning, something bad, something that scares you, something that is causing a loss to your business, for example. At the beginning, it's denial. It doesn't exist. Then it becomes rage. It does exist, but it's evil, and we are going to shut it down. Then it's bargain. So it does exist, but only at my condition. Now we create new words in order to deal with it at my condition. And blockchain is this third phase, basically. First, Bitcoin doesn't exist, it's a joke. Then Bitcoin does exist, but it's dangerous, and we're going to shut it down. But then we don't want to appear like dinosaurs, so we do have to say something. We cannot say Bitcoin, so we will say blockchain.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keisert. Time now to turn to Tony Galippi, CEO of BitPay.com, and Marcel Rollins, he's BitPay's European GM. Let's talk about Bitcoin versus blockchain. Now, I have a theory here, and you tell me what you think about it. My theory is that Bitcoin came and the bankers missed it. They completely missed it. They didn't understand the technology. They didn't understand the beauty of it. They didn't understand how it can transform finance and economics. Then, a few years after that, the penny dropped and they said, oh, you know what, this is ingenious, but they couldn't admit the fact that they missed it, so they talk about blockchain instead.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see when you go into emerging markets and you ask them, do you use Facebook or do you use the internet? More people say, yes, I use Facebook, but they don't realize that they're using the internet. So yeah, Bitcoin is an application for the blockchain. There are other applications for the blockchain, being contracts and property rights, but the fact that banks are engaged now and participating, I think, is a good thing. And no matter what they want to call it, it doesn't matter. They're still building on the same platform that we're building on.
In the beginning, when Bitcoin was seen as a rebel technology almost, and it was seen as fighting, the white paper from Satoshi mentioned, after the 2008 crisis, a certain distrust of the banks in some way. And yet now the banks are adopting it, and this huge cost efficiency that comes with moving money through the ledger. I mean, are the banks simply going to use the cost efficiency to pad their own pockets, number one? Number two, do we care?
They may. I think the best analogy is the telecom industry when voice over IP came out. They adopted it under the hood, and for a while they were still charging carrier rates for all the calls, even though they were realizing a lot of savings underneath.
A theme I've talked about here is the pinwheel in the eyes phenomenon. And the banks looked at Bitcoin and they started to lose their minds because they thought, well, here is a competitor to us, Bitcoin. It competes with fiat money. But this blockchain thing, we could use that to settle trades in our back office and save a lot of money. So they started to dance with the devil by talking about it openly. Bitcoin, blockchain became normalized. They pushed the whole technology, how it works, and more people understood the genius of it. And so, Bitcoin is like a parasite, and they're using the banks to further the virus. and the banks just bought hook, line, and sinker this meme, this Bitcoin technology, and they are co-opted effectively. And as history progresses, we see that they were fooled by Bitcoin like so many others before it, as it moves up from the just having a bunch of internet gamers at the base level to now the major banks, international banks, sovereigns, and it just enters the bigger coliseum, if you will, of the gladiator wars of currency and forex battles.
Well, I took a detour myself through that as well, working for Symbiont, which is a blockchain, not Bitcoin company. And I thought in the beginning that that was the way that the blockchain adoption would go. It's almost like, to use Andreas Antonopoulos' analogy, intranet before internet, the walled gardens before the CTOs were willing to open up their own corporate architecture to the internet itself. And essentially the blockchain, not Bitcoin, was going in that direction.
Banks are members of the Federal Reserve System. We've seen over the past few years, they have all this free money of quantitative easing that the Federal Reserve Bank prints uniquely for them, these participants in this global financial system. Now they look at Bitcoin, they see it as a competitor, and what they want to do is take the blockchain part of it and add their permissions.
Right, well, blockchain without Bitcoin is like Catholicism without hell, right? So they want all the goodies without the pain of having a competitor in their space, Bitcoin, which would destroy the fiat money fractional reserve empires that they've built over the past few decades since the deregulatory period of the 1980s. And it hasn't worked because what they came up with was a centralized, permissioned, walled garden approach to this Bitcoin technology, and that is a complete 180-degree about face to what the technology is all about. Yeah, they can save a few bucks on the back office by clearing trades instantaneously because the clearing and the trade are at the same time using blockchain, that's true. But they nevertheless simply got sucked into the Bitcoin black hole, the Bitcoin vortex that is educating now a whole new class of bankers what this Bitcoin thing is all about. So they were fooled again by the protocol.
I believe that banks at some stage, they already went through the phase of trying to deny Bitcoin's existence and laughing at the people in the very early days. They then tried to co-opt it and take the word Bitcoin out of it and use the word blockchain to popularize. And that tended to actually create lots of attention to our industry and attention to Bitcoin in the end. Now I believe that Bitcoin is going to be adopted by most of the major and powerful financial institutions as they launch their cryptocurrency and Bitcoin exchanges. This will create a two-tiered market. The first market will be people using Bitcoin as it was designed to be used, on a hardware wallet, peer-to-peer, and independent of any financial engineering that can manipulate the money supply of Bitcoin. And then there'll be a regulated market, and the regulated market will be people that provide all their documentation, give it to the exchange, give it to the bank, and then the bank will enforce the regulations and rules about where you can spend it. And then eventually they'll create derivatives products and rehypothecate it and create a fake synthetic Bitcoin. Those two things are going to exist side by side, and they're both going to have their use case. Many people might onboard through the banking's version of Bitcoin, and then they realize when they can't spend their own money, own their own money, and that it's rehypothecated through a synthetic financial product, that they might actually want to own their own money, spend their own money, and engage in the monetary policy that rewards the saver rather than the person taking on debt.